Resolving conflict, making peace. We all know that sometimes things get out of hand and we can lose our temper and get mad at people that we work with. It's understandable because we're in close proximity to these people day in and day out. We're not always going to agree on everything. And there's so much at stake as well with regard to our jobs. And so it's understandable that sometimes things get out of hand. But when things start to get a little heated, we're going to talk about how to get that under control. And the first thing to do is just to stop, to breathe, take a minute to collect yourself. And before you even really go down the road of conflict, ask yourself, is it worth creating strife? Now, that doesn't mean you should just sort of roll over and take every bad situation that you find at work. But do ask yourself if escalating or getting really worked up about something is worth the consequences that could happen as a result. Keep your voice as calm and as normal as possible, and try to avoid using disrespectful language and gestures because that's going to just make things worse. So we're going to walk through some steps that you can take to try to resolve conflict. And this is a very sort of measured, strategic way of going about it. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, this kind of approach may not work. But when things have really gotten to a place where you need to really sit down and work things through in a work situation, these are some ways to do that. The first thing to do is to clarify what the disagreement is about. You may be just completely misunderstanding one another. So agree on what the disagreement is. And then ask what needs are not being met on either side. Why are you in this position that you're in right now and why you're upset? Gather as much information as you can, especially about each other's viewpoints, and then ask questions until everybody involved is fully understanding the issue at hand. And then seek to establish a common goal. What would make everyone happy or as happy as possible? Can you agree on a desired outcome? Find some commonality, something that you have in common that you both want to achieve through the process of negotiating and resolving. I love this quote. When people know that they're working for the same goal, then they are more apt to participate truthfully to make sure that they reach that end goal together. To accomplish this, that commonality can be as simple as both sides want to end the conflict. Okay, agree on what you can agree on at the outset. And then once you've identified that common goal, identify the barriers to achieving that goal. Agree what brought you into the conflict. Think about what problems are keeping you from getting to that goal and what can and cannot be changed about the situation. Sometimes things just can't be changed, and sometimes it just takes a moment for both parties to just admit that and agree on that and identify that you're going to have to find a way around some things because certain things can't be changed. And then just discuss ways that you can get around some of those things that can't be changed. Discuss the ways of meeting the common goal. And this is sort of the root of the mechanism. This is the part where you're exchanging ideas, you're communicating, you're listening to one another, you're brainstorming, trying to figure out solutions to the problem. Just kind of keep at it until you've exhausted all your options here. And there are a few rules that you should keep in mind when you're in this part of the resolution of your conflict. Is that don't assume that your way is the best way. Sometimes we're just wrong. Be willing to admit that if that's true. Don't assume any malicious intent. Assume the best of the other person. Don't assume that they're just out to get you or that they're mean or they're just a bad person. Those kinds of feelings and emotions can get in the way of coming to a resolution. Don't assume agreement of all parties if they're not all voicing their consent. If everybody's not saying, yeah, yeah, that's true, I agree, then don't just assume that because you're talking the loudest that everyone agrees with you. Don't bring up past grievances. Don't bring up the kitchen sink of all those other times that somebody hurt your feelings or did the wrong thing or messed up. That's not necessarily relevant to the current situation. And so do your best to keep the past in the past and concentrate on the situation in front of you. Don't take the conflict up the chain of command unless it's absolutely necessary. Your boss and your boss's boss will appreciate it so much if you can work things out on your own without involving them. Now, there are going to be times when it's absolutely necessary to involve other people, but as much as possible, try to resolve the conflict at the level at which the conflict is taking place. Once you've gone through the process of discussion, considering all the solutions, really working through the nuts and bolts of the problem, agree on the best solution. Is it going to be a perfect solution? No, absolutely not. Is it going to be something that everyone is 100% happy with? Probably not. But you can identify some kind of solution that both sides can live with. So let that be your goal for this moment. Take a moment once you've determined the solution to figure out what the responsibilities are for each party involved in making that solution a reality. Don't just assume that the other person is fully responsible or that it's all their fault, therefore they've got to do all the work of fixing things. It should be a shared responsibility, and each party has to own their responsibility. Don't make assumptions about who's going to do what. Verbally agree about who's going to do what. And then really acknowledge that solution out loud and acknowledge that you agree that it's a win-win. It may not be perfect, but it's a win-win. Express out loud what you've agreed to. And then in a written agreement can sometimes be a really useful thing to do. That way, when you're not sure what you agreed upon, you can pull out that piece of paper and say, remember on XYZ date, we determined that this is what we were going to do. And then after everything has blown over, it may be appropriate to go back and dig up the kitchen sink a little bit. Maybe think about what were some root causes that tend to cause this conflict to come up. Is it a recurring issue that maybe you need to address the bigger picture and not just this one time? Um, think about what kinds of solutions you can come up with to fix, some of those underlying issues. And I like this quote too. A lot of times when we try to fix problems, we get so caught up in fixing it that we do not identify what we need to do so it doesn't happen again. So set in place any kind of mechanisms that need to be put into place to keep the same problem from recurring again. Finally, learn to appreciate the value of the process. The more you resolve conflict in a measured and calm way, the more you appreciate the ability of you and your coworkers to do that, to act like adults, to come to a solution that everyone is reasonably happy with without the need to really lose it and be unprofessional in your response. Recognize that cooperation brings better results for everyone involved.